College football's popularity grew as it became the most dominant sport in the first half of the 20th century. Bowl games are another main reason for the growth of the game because it attracts a national crowd. As rivalries grew, people also became much more interested in the game. After the First World War, people became much more interested in sporting events. People not only urged to play sports, but also wanted to watch and follow and understand the fun of sports. The nation became interested in the most famous win of the 1924 season. During this season, Notre Dame defeated Army 13-7, and Notre Dame would go on to win the national championship. The win over Army was not so famous for what happened in the game, but rather for what sports writer Grantland Rice would write. His work would become the most famous passage in sports history, bringing the four horsemen of Notre Dame into the spotlight. Rice wrote, "Outlined against a blue-gray October sky, the four horsemen rode again. In dramatic lore, they are known as famine, pestilence, destruction, and death. They are only aliases. Their real names are Soldier, Miller, Crowley, and Leyden." Soldier, at 5'7" and 151 pounds, could throw the football accurately and also return punts. Many thought Soldier was cocky, but his talent silenced his critics. Crowley, who was known as Sleepy Jim for always having a tired-looking expression on his face, was a ball carrier. Miller was the team's breakaway threat and was also the greatest open-field runner, according to Notre Dame's coach. Last, Leyden was the fastest and the bee's knees and best defensive player that was known for getting a lot of interceptions. These four men, all with different skill sets, would become the most famous quartet in college football history. George Stickler would go on to take a photo of the men posted on top of four horses. This photo would become legendary. Stickler wanted to make sure the name the Four Horsemen of Notre Dame would stick with these men forever in history. The nation liked to follow the team as it traveled the country and continued its amazing run to a national title.
Everything.
The one constant through all the years, Ray, has been baseball. America has rolled by like an army of steamrollers. It's been erased like a blackboard, rebuilt and erased again. But baseball has marked the time. This field, this game, is a part of our past, Ray. It reminds us of all that once was good, and it could be again. Oh, people will come, Ray. People will most definitely come.
During the latter half of the 19th century, baseball became an increasingly integral part of American society as it grew alongside big businesses and the working class, all of which played roles in the Progressive Era. Striking popularity in 1845 as Alexander Joy Cartwright organized a group of men who would become the sport's finest known team, the Knickerbockers. Baseball swept the nation, drawing everyone's attention to the fields they played on. Baseball's popularity was in part due to the mirroring of the economic and social changes of this era, such as the rise of big businesses and the increase in racial tension. In many ways, baseball imitated the precarious American economy and its expansion control leagues and labor issues. By 1900, baseball had become America's sport. It was simply the cat's meow. Aside from possessing great talent, the professional players represented fairness, justice, and hope. These men became grandiose figures to the public. Rarely did other people transcend the popularity that these men received. They had created a gentleman's game. The reputation of baseball and baseball players during this era is what caused the world to look twice following the 1919 World Series. During the 1920 professional season, beef spread about the league that some players on the Chicago White Sox had thrown their games against the Cincinnati Reds in the World Series the year prior. This prompted the Supreme Court to investigate the issue. Accusations were made against the 8 members of the 1919 Chicago White Sox: Swede Reisberg, Fred McMullen, Claude Williams, Chick Gandil, Buck Weaver, Oscar Felsch, Eddie Cicotti, and the great Shoeless Joe Jackson. Shoeless Joe Jackson was the big cheese of the crew. Jackson supposedly received his nickname during a game in South Carolina when he was spotted running to third in his socks after having gotten blisters from a new pair of cleats. "You shoeless son of a gun, you!" fans shouted, thus resulting in the name Shoeless Joe. This 1919 conspiracy was created by Chick Gandil. Funded by New York gangster Arnold Rothstein, Gandil was able to convince the other men that they could pull the stint off. The reason for the scandal was in part due to the White Sox owner, Charles Comiskey. Comiskey, owner of the Chicago White Sox, underpaid his players. During this time, however, a player cannot leave a team and search for another without consent of the owner. Therefore, they had the option of either taking the offer made by Comiskey or not playing professional baseball. This had created a great distaste for him by his players, thus motivating the 8 men to carry out the scandal. After agreeing to pay the players $100,000 to split, Arnold Rothstein and other major gamblers bet over $500,000 on the Reds. In September of 1920, following the accusations made, Jackson and Cicotti confessed to intentionally losing games during the previous World Series. Cicotti was quoted in the New York Times article saying, "I never did anything I regretted so much in my life." These confessions prompted professional baseball to ban these 8 men for life. On August 4th, 1921, Commissioner of Baseball Kennesaw Mountain Landis issued the statement, "Regardless of the verdict of the juries, no player who throws a ball game, no player that undertakes or promises to throw a ball game, no player that sits in conference with a bunch of crooked players and gamblers where the ways and means of throwing a game are discussed and does not promptly tell his club about it, will ever play professional baseball."
The Babe was born on February 6, 1895 in Baltimore, Maryland. George Herman Ruth Jr. was one of 8 kids, but sadly only he and his sister Mammy made it to adulthood. As a kid, Babe was always causing beef and getting into trouble. This was due to his parents having to work long hours and never being around. He was sent to St. Mary's Industrial School for Boys in order to get a stricter environment where he avoided being bum-rushed and gained a love for baseball. He worked on his baseball skills tirelessly with brother Matthias, and a father-son role was formed between the two of them. Babe would have excelled in many sports as a child, yet the scarce opportunity for sports during the era led Babe to only play baseball. Matthias got Baltimore Orioles owner Jack Dunn to come and watch Babe play, and within an hour a contract was made between Ruth and the Baltimore Orioles. Yet Ruth was only 19 when this contract was made, therefore Dunn had to become Ruth's legal guardian for him to sign it. George got his nickname Babe from the other men on the team calling him Jack's new Babe. Babe was then traded to the Red Sox before becoming a Yankee, where his fame became all wet. When coming to New York, Babe moved into the Ansonia Hotel on Broadway with his wife Helen, which was also the New York home for many celebrities. When Helen died in a fire, Babe became interested in a young widow, Claire Hogston. They were married the day before opening game in 1929. Babe had an adopted daughter, and Claire had a daughter of her own. They adopted each other's children. Babe, a true love for kids, he never denied an autograph or a chance to visit sick kids in the hospital. He was a huge donator to charities associated with children. He never tried to hide his difficult childhood and gave back to his childhood school, St. Mary's, and the Xaverian brothers who ran it. Ruth helped change the game of baseball entirely. Although after the Black Sox trial helped bum-rush many Americans away from ballparks, Babe Ruth's 1920 54 home run season couldn't keep the fans away. This created a wave of individuals who started to love the game. Yankee manager Miller Huggins' assertion that the American fan likes the fellow who carries the wallop proved true. Ruth and the Yankees were the first team in baseball history to have more than 1 million fans in a season. Further, Ruth's athletic accomplishments led for an all-wet idea of the growth of athletics in America. Yankee Stadium was the house that Ruth built, but baseball was the sport that Ruth saved. Babe became known as an American folk hero through advertisements and news articles. Folk tales like Paul Bunyan, John Henry, and Pecos Bill related to Babe's story and the fact that they all triumphed over science. For example, the Bambino's home runs signified man's triumphs over harsh conditions in the West. For example, the play of Ruth helped millions have something to believe in during the Great Depression. Although, as a kid, the Babe was like Tom Sawyer or Huckleberry Finn in the fact that They always got into trouble, but were always forgivable. Babe was an innocent character in the fact that he was always forgivable and his name alone was innocent. The folktale not only created his aura, but sports writers and advertisers created Babe as well. Ruth is an all-wet idea of a typical 1920s individual. Ruth was the highest paid player for most of his career, yet he spent all of his money. This was exemplary of the time period of the Roaring Twenties, where spending lavishly was the only way of not being called a bird. Babe frequently visited whorehouses, ate too much, and played too much. Ruth also symbolized the era because he swung for the fences every time after an era of baseball where being conservative was key. This risky swing for the fences represented overconsumption during the Roaring Twenties. In the 1920s, business was booming and people had more money to spend. Wealth was being spent on new products like radios, ovens, and new foods. Babe Ruth's success on the field helped him become a successful star in big money advertisements. Ruth did everything from cereal to soap. He even had his own line of candy bars. Ruth eventually had to hire a business manager to account for all the extra money he was making through advertisements. Advertisements kept Ruth in the public eye more than the newspaper did. Ads like the Murphy Rich Soap Company emphasized his home run hitting. Many other ads also emphasized his home run hitting. This made Ruth the big cheese when it came to being the greatest home run hitter of all time, even though he had some off seasons. Many of Ruth's ads were directed at children. For example, his ad for Wheaties said you should eat Wheaties if you want to be like the Babe. This sparked a phenomenon that is still around today that says Wheaties is the breakfast of champions. Babe Ruth built his legacy on the long ball. He changed the game of baseball in a way that perfectly exemplified the Roaring Twenties. His actions, personality, and social position created an image of greatness for Ruth. Whether it comes to playing baseball, doing charity work, or modeling for a Wheaties box, Babe Ruth changed the game of baseball for the better and created a social wave of popularity among sports.